Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to take another look at our P6 practice, and specifically, we are going to focus on the version of our P6 that focuses on importing a CSV file into an array of structures for the purpose of maintaining a simple inventory. Now, your particular P6 might be a little bit different than this, and so I would encourage you to maybe apply certain principles that we are looking at in this series of videos to other projects. And specifically in this particular video, we are going to focus in on our export products. The idea is that you have imported some of your products, maybe you've added a product, maybe you've searched through the product, whatever the situation might be, you are now ready to store persistently your updated inventory. And so let's take a look at this function signature. You'll notice that it accepts a constant char file name. The idea is that you would pass to it the output file name that ultimately you want to store your new inventory in. Sometimes that may be the same one that you imported from, or it may be another file entirely. In other words, for the purposes perhaps a search query, you may wish to write the results of that search query to a different file. If, however, you were updating an inventory, in other words, you were wanting to use a single file as the source of your inventory, you would likely use the same file name for both your import and your export. The second argument is an array of structures. Now, again, we're still dealing with statically declared memory. However, though, this same process will work for dynamically allocated memory, because we are also going to be passing the n, or the number of actually used elements in the array. Now notice I have a little comment here. If you've been following along with the earlier videos, you'll notice that I accidentally left off something in the function signature. So again, just make sure that you're using this version of the function signature. Now, let's go ahead and jump down here to our export products. We have a few things that we need to do before we can jump into creating variables and actually using them. And that is going to be to validate our input arguments. And so to begin with, we need to make sure, for instance, that our file name is in fact not equal to null. In other words, we're going to check to see if it is equal to null. The other thing that we want to do is we also want to make sure that utilizing our string length function, that the file name is in fact not less than 5 characters. Where did I get 5 characters from? Well, the idea is we want to keep this .csv file format pretty consistent. And so the .csv contributes 4 characters, and then the file name has to be a minimum of 1 character long. And so at the very least, the shortest file name that we could justifiably use is going to be 5 characters. So in this case, we're just going to check to see if it's less than 5. And if it is, then we simply produce some sort of error message back to the user. Error, please provide a valid file name. And then no matter what, we just want to remember to set our results equal to exit failure. Under the else branch, in our else if, we also want to check to make sure that our export results are not equal to null. And so we do that by simply checking to see if they are equal to null, in which case we provide another error message that says, error, please provide a valid export results. Sorry about that. I thought I had that in my buffer right there. It was just where that errant Control-C and Control-Z came from. And lastly, results are going to be equal to exit failure. And then the other one that we want to check is our n. Now, in this particular example, it's probably not going to be too dire if we accidentally pass a negative value for n. In other words, basically, if we try to loop through using the n as the max value, we won't accomplish anything anyway, but it is probably worth giving some feedback back to the user in the event that our n is less than 0. We again simply provide a print statement. Error, please provide a non-negative n. Now, keep in mind, this does not prevent the possibility where n is actually equal to 0. In other words, there is nothing to export, and arguably that's a good thing. If you, for instance, are exporting the results into a results.csv file, essentially that's the way for the user to know that their results query ended up being empty. If, however, you accidentally pass n as 0 and you were using the same file for the purposes of an inventory that you had imported from, you will essentially end up wiping out your entire inventory. So again, be very careful with how you use your export function. But nonetheless, we simply want to say results are equal to exit failure. Now, under the else branch is where things will now get interesting. The first thing that we want to do is we want to create an index variable that will simply allow for us to loop through all the rows in our array of structures. And we probably also need a file output pointer, which we can then use to open the file. And then under the else, the first thing that we wish to do is going to be our fopen or fopen of our file name. And then this time around, we want to write to the file. You probably should take just a second to refresh your memory on the differences between the W for write and the A for append. In this particular example, when we're exporting, we will likely want to write. We can also, for instance, add an extra file utilizing that file name and call it a log file. In other words, what we'll do is we'll just essentially replace whatever the file extension is, the .csv, with the .log, or in some cases, we can even just append on the .log file to append. Now, at this point, then we can simply check to see if our output file pointer is equal to null. If it is, printf error failed to open. And since we've got the luxury of telling the user which file we failed to open by providing the %s and then the file name, that will allow for them or help them rather with their troubleshooting. And again, results are just simply equal to exit failure. Under the else branch, then probably the first thing that we want to remember to do is our fclose, and we want to close our output file pointer. And now what we can do is set up our for loop where we loop from 0 up to, but not including our n, incrementing by 1. And now we use our fprintf. Now, the question becomes, what do we want our output to look like? And well, that is going to be application specific. But in this case, we kind of like to keep the output the same as the input. In other words, what I'd like to do is I'll use this as a sample. I'm just going to leave this here in front of me so that I can appreciate then the order of the fields. In other words, my ID, my name, my type, my description, my price, and my quantity. And we can do this a couple of different ways. We can do this as one long fprintf statement, or we can do this as a series of smaller fprintf statements using our output file pointer, the format spec associated with a given field, followed by that comma for all but the last field. And so in this case, that first one is going to be whatever the export results square brackets index dot ID holds. And so let's take just a second to talk about this. You'll notice here that I've done a couple of things. I'm leveraging my index. I'm also leveraging the array known as export results. I'm using the index to access an individual element in that export results array. And then I'm using the .id to access a particular field in that export results array of structures. Let's do this one more time, make sure that we really appreciate what's going on. We have our fprintf, our output file pointer. Again, our format spec is going to be %s, followed by a comma. Why? Because we know it's a string. We want to utilize the entire array of structures. However, only a specific structure in that array, and then now the name associated with that particular element in the array of structures. At this point, hopefully you've started to see the pattern. I will move on then to the type, which is also going to be a string. Lastly, as far as the strings go, will be the description. Again, the pattern is the same. They're all %s's followed by commas, but now things get a little bit different with our price. And in this case, we're going to use, again, our %.2f. You could argue that we could throw in the $sign, but again, in the original file format, you'll notice that it was not in there. It was only in the presentation portion when we displayed it. And then followed by the comma. And then again, we want to use the export results array, the particular element in that export results array, and then the dot price. And then lastly, the quantity. And so we'll follow this up then with an fprintf, output %d for an integer, but more importantly, a new line and no comma this time. In other words, that's the end of the line for that row. Export results, again, index, and then the dot quantity. Now, you could do this as one long fprintf statement, and that's perfectly fine. It just gets to be a little bit long. You can even break that one line up. Is there a marginal performance penalty for doing multiple fprintfs? Negligible, but it is something to consider. If anything, this just helps you understand then the individual columns for troubleshooting purposes. Now, let's go ahead and build this to make sure that we don't have any obvious mistakes, in which case we do. That's always good. I see what I've missed here. I've missed my comma there. Good. Go ahead and build it. So we seem like we have working code. Now we need to test it. Well, the easiest way to test it is to come up to our main, where we have already practiced with our import function. And even though we haven't yet done anything with the products that we have imported, we can now simply turn around and export those products. And we're going to call this one results.csv. And we are going to pass to it the entire products array, followed by the n that was updated in the import. Now, ultimately, in later video, we'll actually leverage the return value for the export products. But at this point, then, we should have a very simple workflow that allows for us to import, display, and then turn around and export our products from our CSV file. So let's go ahead and build it. Let's go ahead and come out to our console. I'm going to go ahead and clear the console because we will get a little bit of extra noise here. And then I'm just simply going to run the switch combination that we've been using to test this. That's our P6 practice, our search, and our ID. And again, I'm just going to put something in for right now. We haven't even gotten to the search portion, but you'll see that I have been able to read in the contents of the file. You can see the IDs from the earlier videos, the display products. But more importantly, if I type in dir, you'll see that I now have an additional file called results.csv. And if I go to my Explorer window, you can see that I do, in fact, have a second CSV file here that I can drag and drop into NetBeans. And one second here. There we go. All right. And you can see that unless I've missed something, they should be identical. And we can always check this, but just a quick overview of it, looks like they are, in fact, the same format. So again, hopefully this makes sense to you. Even before you've started with any of your search features or anything along those lines, just prove that you can successfully import a file, display it, and export it. So hopefully you found this video useful. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and thank you for watching.